So the fifth area that we wanted to discuss, and we're massively going over the hour now, by the way. But hey, it's all good. It's really interesting, and there's quite a lot to cover, to be fair. So I was semi anticipating when we were looking at this and preparing it. I was like, I might need to do a part one and a part two, but we'll work that
Yeah.
out in the edit, so it's fine. There's quite a lot of ground to cover still anyway. But do you feel that the fifth area, haven't spoken about what we've already spoken about, was around acceptance? So and can you sort of explain how people have been unaccepting of people's situation and how maybe situations you've come across?
Oh yeah, definitely. So obviously, well, the biggest thing I can talk about is obviously the event we ran last year, drag networking. Comments like it's too much. That's at the end of the day, if you don't want to come to my networking event, don't come. I don't need to know that it's too much, or you're no longer going to do any business with us, and those kind of things. And also people people having, comments about, who's attending and all that kind of thing. Because at the end of the day, what is it hurting you? If 50 people want to come and celebrate and support LGBT people, and because we raised over £500 for Peterborough Pride. Now, if people have an issue with that, then they really need to assess. And I also would go one step further and say, if you as a business have allowed that person to comment upon your decision, I would also suggest, why are you still talking to those people? But that's just me. Yeah. But it is, so that's sort of unacceptable. But what I found last year is that those people that I'd had those relationships with, and some people not even very deep relationships, very surface, but the ones that were going, you know what? Why is that your issue? Why are you annoyed? And people that I hadn't necessarily expected to sort of support the event, or just to say, yeah, we're on your side, just to do little things. Because I know personally that even though it shouldn't be, but it's still for some people, it's still such an issue to align themselves to an LGBT plus cause. Mm-hmm. And I don't know why, but it is. And even just changing their logo over to a rainbow logo or an all-inclusive logo like this fan is. All those kind of, and it's so ridiculous really, because if you think about it on a whole, again, I always bring it back to like women's rights. If you were to say that about women's rights, women's aid, or any of those kind of situations, my goodness, you would be hung, drawn and quartered there and then. But because it's an LGBT plus issue, it's sort of okay to still have that mentality, which sort of isn't acceptable. It's, well, not sort of, it's just unacceptable, because at the end of the day, I can't change who I am. Just like you can't change the colour of your skin, just like, so there's all these, so for me, that's a very big sort of unacceptable area.
Yeah. Do you think, well, one of the questions I wanted to ask is, do you think we're seeing progress though? So one of the things, one of the things I pick up on, certainly in my time working, and I'm sort of seeing a bit of a change in generation in the time that I've been working, maybe because I'm starting to get a bit older, I guess, which is a bit scary, because I used to be the young buck in the workplace, but that's no longer the case, right? But I see more of an acceptance. I see much less racism, or I believe, or my perception is, I see a lot less racism. Yeah, and even in the real spit and sawdust industries that I've worked in the past, real male-dominated areas, businesses too, I've seen more acceptance of women in the workplace. Even I've seen better acceptance of even homosexuality, so gay people. But I think sort of the diverse range that we've been speaking about, I think that's sort of going to be the next step of acceptance over time. But I look at my eldest daughter, my stepdaughter Shannon, and I speak to her about their situation at school. She's secondary school now, she's 14. There's like her generation is massively accepting of people are who they are. They just want to be who they want to be, and just let them be. Let's just love everyone and be cool. And there's a massive level of acceptance. So I'm kind of quite excited for how, as that generation hits the workplace, I think that's going to I think that we're going to see a real culture change.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Is that your finding as well?
Yeah. So it's come leaps and bounds. Like if I think about, so I grew up in the 90s and you had no real representation of gay people on TV. The only representation you sort of had on TV was they were either very promiscuous, so they would sleep with everybody, or they had HIV. They'd end up having HIV. Which obviously at the time, obviously you do need to talk, about like that, because that obviously was an issue. But also as well, there was no like positive story. If I think about the gay icons of the 90s, you had the couple from EastEnders, who I can't remember their names, and then you also had Queer as Folk. Obviously, I didn't watch Queer as Folk when I was in the 90s, because I would have been like 7. So. Yeah. But again, that show was all about sex, and obviously it clearly had a purpose, and it had and in those moments and this is what I always say. People always say this, sort of bringing it back to drag queens, but some people say, oh, I don't get those drag queens that do that really big makeup and that really bright, colourful hair, and they look sort of really androgynous. And I always say that without them, I can't exist. So obviously I go for a more natural, feminine kind of look, but without those kind of drag queens, I won't be able to walk in the door and normalize it for people. So I wouldn't be able to, I wouldn't be able to exist without those. And I think, you know, we've come leaps and bounds, but where the rest of the sort of LGBT plus rainbow is they're probably about 50, well, we might be a bit quicker actually, but we might be about 50 years behind. So trans rights, trans activism is probably about 50 years behind where you sort of, so if you take off 50 from where we are now, that's where like gay people were. So you're talking about Stonewall, you're talking about rights, you're talking about it being decriminalized, you're talking about actually being able to be who you are without there being any repercussion.
Yeah.
And you can do that now. You can transition and all that kind of thing, but it's just working out where the next step of that is. And there is. The younger generation really is into, you know, just letting people be who they want to be, and also not having these labels, finding whoever they want to love, no matter what. And that's fantastic to see. I remember at Peterborough Pride, the amount of young people there was just phenomenal, because it meant that what I only do this so the next generation it's better for. Because I grew up in a generation where, yes, it was all right, but it wasn't the best. I was bullied, I was picked on, you know, all that kind of thing. But who hasn't been? But do you know what I mean? But it's that kind of thing of, if you can try to eradicate that, you're only then LGBT plus people are incredibly creative. I think about not only creative, but we're also incredibly intelligent. You also, and I think there's also, that has come along, there's still a way to go. And I think in a general sense, it's come leaps and bounds. But I also think that in a business setting or in a business world, we're not there yet. We're probably about 5 to 10 years back from where we are generally in society. And again, I think that's because you still have this, unfortunate to say, older generation that, you know, are still sort of clinging on, is what I like to say, to sort of ideals that, you know, that aren't there anymore, you know. So, you know, it's difficult. Yes, there has come, and I think when like you say, when you come in, and when that sort of younger generation starts coming into the workforce, you wait and watch, because we were always told, you need to speak your mind, you need to tell people when they're wrong. We've had that phase, and we're still having that phase. The next generation, I do not know what's going to happen, because they've had even more of that, and they've been brought up with people that have been outspoken. So, yeah, wait and watch. I can't wait personally.
Be interesting, won't it? Yeah, I think it's very interesting. I think you're quite polarizing in your view on the older generation as well. But everyone's
not
obviously
everybody.
entitled. Yeah, of course.
It isn't everybody. I do have to say.
Yeah,
there have been some fantastic, but the majority. Every time I see a comment or hear something bad, it is unfortunate. Well, it's not just that generation. It's a certain type of person that probably has an issue with everyone. But yeah, it is. But yeah.
No, I completely understand. So
Thank you so much for tuning in. We really appreciate your time. Please do follow me at Pete Rushmer on LinkedIn, or on Facebook, follow Flagship Training UK, and you can find us on YouTube too at Flagship UK.